I want to say a few more words about Shamoun, the last patriarch of the Shamoun dynasty. This is a statement from Awa that I'm going to read. And Shamoun Eshai was assassinated. He was murdered in 1975. And as I said, you have these two important Assyrians who died within a few weeks of each other, George Lamza and Shamoun. And it's a very important life in a very important phase of Assyrian history, when tragedy and basically being exiled from their homeland, the loss of the promise of nationhood, when all these things were happening, some genocidal incidences. He went through that, and of course, as we know, Shamoun was exiled by the British, but we'll read a little bit about his life right now. This is a letter honoring and commemorating him by the current patriarch, his successor, Awa. November 6, 2025 marks the 50th anniversary of the passing of His Holiness, the late Eshai Shamoun, the 23rd of thrice blessed memory, the 119th Catholicos Patriarch of the Assyrian Church of the East, who fell asleep in the Lord in San Jose, California, after time dedicated to service to the Assyrian Church of the East and the Assyrian nation. Now, this makes it sound like he peacefully transitioned from this world to the next, but is violent, right? He died unnaturally and violently. For 55 years, the late Catholicos Patriarch toiled without rest to serve the Lord and the faithful of his church and pursue the political rights of the Assyrian people. Through one of the most turbulent periods in Assyrian history, marked by exile, persecution, the search for identity and unity, and the diaspora. His Holiness's extraordinary life and work was, above all, characterized by intensive persistence, centered on the duty to save the Assyrian people and his beloved Church of the East from utter destruction and disintegration. As the longest reigning Catholicos Patriarch of the Church of the East in modern history, the memory of the late Catholicos Patriarch is embedded in the souls and hearts of his people. Per the decree of the Holy Synod of the Assyrian Church of the East, April 2024, the 50th memorial of his repose shall be observed by all archdioceses, dioceses, and parishes of the Assyrian Church of the East worldwide the first Sunday of the Annunciation, November 30th, 2025. May the Lord grant eternal rest unto the late Catholicos Patriarch and make all Assyrians worthy of his exemplary life, work, and supreme sacrifice. And for his devotion to the Assyrian people and the Assyrian Church, he was murdered, violently and brutally murdered. When I first visited the Assyrian community, which is the Assyrian community in Yonkers, New York, I believe I got a copy of this book. This is the Marganithus, a translation of basically the doctrinal statement of the Assyrian Church of the East. It's translated by him, but it's written by Maridishu, the Metropolitan of Suwa, Nisibin, and Armenia, I believe in the 1200s. So this is an important work, and I want to find my copy. It's kind of a simple printing. I think it had like a paper cover. It was staple, but there's a little bit of a thicker book. Not too long, medium-sized book. But like I said, this is a doctrinal statement of the Assyrian Church of the East, and it's translated by Eshai Shamoun. I want to read a little bit of his life. We're going to look at a brief biography of His Holiness, but I recommend getting a copy of this book.
Jesus was an Aramaic-speaking Jew of the Middle East, and the Assyrians are Aramaic-speaking Christians in the Middle East who have endured persecution for over 1,000 years. Join Voice of the Word Aramaic Bible teacher, artist, and author Stephen Missick as he examines the Bible through the ancient languages, peoples, lands, cultures, and times in which it was first revealed. Research the Scriptures, rescue persecuted Christians, and restore the Church to its Semitic roots. And now, Voice of the Word.
The Pearl, the doctrinal statement of the Assyrian Church of the East. His Holiness Eshai Shamoun, the 23rd Catholicos Patriarch, was the supreme head of the Church of the East, as universal pastor from 1920 until his assassination in 1975. Born in southern Turkey, what is today southern Turkey, His Holiness was raised with care, having received theological and liturgical training in the Middle East and England at St. Augustine's College and later Cambridge University. He worked tirelessly fighting for the Assyrian Church of the East and his Assyrian people. Often in danger of his life, he met with foreign diplomats and heads of states, appealing to the League of Nations and later the United Nations, all the while contacting world leaders and discussing with them the Assyrian question. Basically, it's about the Assyrian people getting shafted. We have this movie, Lawrence of Arabia, and here we have Lawrence out there, and he recruits the Arabian people to fight for him, to fight not just against the Ottoman Empire and the Germans, but to fight for independence, sovereignty. And the Arabs did, and they were given independence and sovereignty after the war. They were rewarded for their efforts. The Assyrian people also fought with the Allied powers against Germany, the Ottoman Empire, but the promises made to them were not fulfilled, and they were abandoned to a very dark fate. But God's in control. We're going to see how things play out in the end. I have a hopeful vision for the future, but it's still a difficult time. In later years, he was received throughout the Middle East by Islamic heads of state in the most respectful and amiable of circumstances, which speaks to his worldly sophistication and influence as a great leader. Eshai Shamoun was a profound scholar, an exemplary writer, and a charismatic speaker, as well as being a recognized subject matter expert in ecclesiastical history and authority on the history of Christianity in the Middle East and the Far East. An innovative leader of the Assyrian Church and the Assyrian people, well schooled in both the ecclesiastical aspects of his vocation as well as geopolitical issues. Attuned to the needs of his flock and nation, he mindfully navigated the tenuous landscape with uncompromising ethics, integrity, and superior leadership, which were the hallmarks of his character, and a truly remarkable patriarch. His agility in managing both the secular and temporal affairs bespoke his magnificent stewardship of the Assyrian people and the Church of the East. So, but this book, of course, is it's important to recognize his life and contributions, and some of this is a translation, but it's got some introduction and commentary as well. This is written, like I said, by Mari Dishu of Suin, Nisibin, and Armenia in the year 1298. Like I said, you had a family of the Patriarch, where the Patriarch's nephew would succeed him. So it's kind of like a royal priesthood, a priest king of the Assyrian people, the Patriarch. And this line of succession went on for hundreds of years. So it's basically the Assyrian royal family. So there was controversy about electing a patriarch and not necessarily having to be inherited as a lineage. But that matter wasn't solved in a civilized way, but through a brutal murder. And just looking at it, I suspect, they always want to make it seem like you got the patsy out there, the man who commits the murder. And we see this in the United States today with the Kennedy assassination, but also with the man who tried the attempted assassination of President Trump. It's strange credulity that young man worked by himself. He's obviously recruited. They say he has no contact with anybody, but there he is while he can be seen communicating to people, probably the FBI, on his phone while he's trying to carry out the assassination of President Trump. Thank God that he failed in that. And then with Charlie Kirk, once again, there's probably a wider criminal conspiracy in murdering this man of God. But the government, our corrupt government, always wants to cover these things up. So I think there's a lot of suspicions as well about the murder of Eshai Shamoun, the 23rd. I think that this man was put up to it, the man who murdered him. And like I said, I believe it's probably part of a wider criminal conspiracy. I think it's just obvious. And of course, there's motives for killing the patriarch. This is a horrific thing. And I've done a lot of research over the years on the Assyrian Church of the East, and this is like a subject nobody wants to talk about. And I think it's important. Like I said, this is a pivotal life and a pivotal period in the history of the Assyrian people. and like you're saying, he's the longest serving patriarch, and he served under very difficult circumstances. I mean, being forced into exile as well. So I want to read this brief biography for this program. His Holiness Eshai Shamoun the 23rd, Catholicos Patriarch, was the supreme head of the Church of the East as universal pastor, the 119th Patriarch, based on apostolic succession. The official name of the Church of the East is the Holy Apostolic Catholic Church of the East. It was founded by the apostles St. Peter, St. Thomas, St. Thaddeus, St. Bartholomew, and St. Mari of the 70. His Holiness was born on February 26, 1908 in Kuchanis, the mountainous region located in southern Turkey. Eshai Shamoun was raised with great care, having received the required theological and liturgical training by the late Archdeacon of the Patriarch, the very Reverend Thoma of Ashita, and the Patriarch's uncle, the Bishop of Rustaka, His Grace Mar Yosef, or Joseph Kananishu, who was canonized as a saint. In 1920, upon the death of his uncle, Mar Pulish, or Paul Shamoun, His Holiness was ordained Patriarch at the age of 12. In recognition of his keen intelligence and capability, it was deemed critical to further his education and training, so the Patriarch was sent to St. Augustine's College, Canterbury, England. After completing that phase of preparatory schooling, he was accepted at Westcott House, Cambridge University, where he specialized in history and statecraft. His formal schooling under the auspices of academia ended abruptly in 1927 when his nation and church required his presence and leadership. However, his informal education continued to evolve over the following 2 decades, in which the harder school of adversity had illuminated and deepened his wisdom whilst maturing his personality. Experience is always a great teacher, and what a life of rich and varied experience His Holiness spent. Simply isolating two mere decades of his tenure from 1927-1947, in which he worked tirelessly fighting for his Assyrian people, would for some be their failing. However, in these difficulties, His Holiness Eshai Shamoun emerged as a profound and substantive leader. Of course, he was forced into exile after the Kingdom of Iraq at that time carried out the Simili massacres. So to punish the Assyrian people even further, the Patriarch was exiled. And I want to say about England, all this duplicitous and evil connivings and designs of England, and now, England's in a very bad state. And I did this Oxford study tour, and I enjoyed studying in England on the Oxford campus and visiting Cambridge as well. And there's a lot to like and admire about the British and English civilization. But I think there's some shameful aspects of their history as well. And I wonder, with all that they're going through right now, if some of it's divine retribution and judgment upon England for its crimes. Not recent crimes either. There's a lot of good things the British did, but there's a lot of horrific and terrible things they've done as well. And it's continuing to on-go right now, because their current prime minister is just it's sad to see basically a collapse of a once great civilization, but the flaws within that great civilization are causing the cracks and destruction from within. Let me continue with the life of Mar Shamoun Eshai. His Holiness arrived in the United States in 1940. In addition to his work that dealt with the Assyrian cause, he provided oversight and direction that resulted in the establishment of parishes, built churches, as well as edited and translated literature from the Aramaic and the English for the use of the Church of the East of the United States and other countries. By doing so, he further promulgated the mission of the founding apostles and sought to be an inclusive educator for his flock so the faithful could learn the ancient liturgy in a consistent way. During the same time, the Patriarch had consecrated several bishops, ordained many priests and deacons, and created the first English-speaking Assyrian parish in Seattle, Washington. His dedication and diligence resulted in a considerable presence for the Church of the East throughout the United States. However, his work did not simply end here. Perhaps the most important of His Holiness' activities in the apostolic pastoral visits to churches in India and the Middle Eastern countries. Always on the move in Iraq, Cyprus, England, Switzerland, and the United States, often in danger of his life, he met with foreign diplomats and heads of state. Through his persistence, he created a world presence for the Assyrians by his representations to the League of Nations, and later his appeals before the United Nations. All the while, he's contacting world leaders and discussing with them the situation of the Assyrians with his indefatigable energy and uncompromising commitment to his cause. His Holiness's dogged persistence, in fact, his life centered only on his duty to help his hapless Assyrians and his beloved Church of the East from utter destruction and disintegration. Prior to Mar Eshai Shamoun's intervention, Assyrians living among their Islamic neighbors shared a tenuous relationship, which is firmly rooted in mistrust on both sides of this religious chasm. Therefore, in 1948, His Holiness made a revolutionary announcement of a new policy for the Assyrian people in the Church of the East through direct contact with embassy representatives of Middle Eastern countries in Washington, the United Nations headquarters. He broke down the walls of suspicion and misunderstanding. This new policy decreed Assyrians and members of the Assyrian Church of the East, or the Church of the East, all over the world remain loyal as faithful citizens of the countries in which they lived, something he had never done, something that had never been done before in our history. The result was electric. There were amiable responses from Syria, Lebanon, and Iran, resulting in the establishment of cordial relationships with these governments. Most historic and significant were his trips to Iraq in 1970 and 1971 at the invitation of the Iraqi government. This unprecedented act sent waves of hope throughout the Assyrian community living in Iraq, for it had been in 1933 that the Patriarch and his family were exiled and separated from the Assyrians by the British government. For 37 long years, the Patriarch was forbidden from ministering to his considerable flock in Iraq. These trips resulted in strengthening the spirit and the clergy of those faithful Assyrians. Furthermore, the building of schools, churches, and the establishment of a seminary in Tehran, Iran, resulted only from his direction and guardianship. His Holiness was a prolific scholar, an exemplary writer, and a charismatic speaker. As early as 1926, at the age of 18, the Patriarch attended the Nicene Council of Commemoration held at Westminster Abbey in London. This is 100 years ago, right? This year is the 1,700th year anniversary of the Creed. The Apostles' Creed is very important because it defines basic Christian doctrine. And I think that what is a Christian? What does it mean to be a Christian? To be a legitimate Christian church. I think that the statement of the apostolic teachings derived from the New Testament that are enunciated and clarified in the Nicene Creed are very, very important. The essential elements of the faith. So the Nicene Creed is critical in defining Christian orthodoxy versus heresy. And it's a good test because, a true Christian denomination is going to affirm the Nicene Creed, and heretical groups can't. So it's a very, very important statement of the faith, and it's recited by all true Christians, and the importance of the Nicene Creed is recognized. And so you have this commemoration this year of the 1,700th year anniversary, the 1,600th year anniversary celebrations. Mar Shamoun Eshai, or Mar Eshai Shamoun, was involved in those commemorations. So, so he had these trips. These trips resulted in strengthening the spirit of the clergy and those faithful Assyrians. The Church and State Conference held in Oxford and the Faith and Order Conference held in Edinburgh. I visited and stayed at Oxford. I stayed at Oxford, and I visited Edinburgh when I was doing my Oxford study tour. It was very nice. They were both attended by His Holiness in 1937. The distinguished Athenaeum Club of London had bestowed upon His Holiness by conferring an honorary membership. He is a member of the American Historical Society and other organizations, as well as being a representative of the World Council of Churches and being a notable among those chronicled in the annals of Who's Who repeatedly. Numerous appeals and publications concerning the Assyrian question written by the Patriarch were presented to various governments and international bodies, highlight him as a writer of distinction. Various Aramaic and Syriac books have been translated in English by His Holiness Mar Eshai Shamoun, some of which are portions of the Aramaic liturgy, the Book of Hymns and Praises, Synodical Rules of the Church of the East, the Book of the Pearl, or the Marganitha, the standard theological work of the Church of the East, the publication of the Harmonies of Mar Narsai, the great saint and scholar of the 5th century, in 2 volumes, numbering more than 1,400 pages, along with 70 pages of introduction and critical apparatus in English by His Holiness, as well as countless outstanding sermons on the historical doctrine of the Church of the East. A subject matter expert in ecclesiastical history and authority on the history of Christianity in the Middle East and the Far East, Mar Eshai Shamoun was fluent and literate both in the Aramaic, Modern Syriac languages. 1940, Time magazine wrote of His Holiness, Cambridge educated Mar Shamoun he also speaks perfect English. he was in England during his formative years, so I'm sure he spoke perfect English. That's where he's getting his education at as well. His scholarly discourses on the church history at the International Ecclesiastical Conferences at various universities attracted worldwide attention. The succession of the patriarchs of let me read it this way. The succession of the patriarchs from the Damar Shamoun family was a custom that had become institutionalized for over 658 years, of which Mar Shamoun, the 23rd Catholicos Patriarch, was the last. For Mar Eshai Shamoun, his term as Patriarch was mired with tremendous hardship, and the tenure of his indefatigable work on behalf of the Church of the East and the Assyrian nation finally took its toll on him. Continuing the tradition of apostolic succession of the family was impossible, for there were no Damar Shamoun nephews to succeed him. His Holiness, ever mindful of his flock, took the opportunity to take the growth and evolution of the glorious Church of the East to the next level by developing and proposing a plan for succession that was an electoral selection process, not an inherited one. His proposal had been accepted. So you always had a nephew, and with him there was no nephew. I guess they could have found some other relative, but he decided instead to move into the future outside of the Damar Shamoun family. After 53 years of focused dedication, the Patriarch retired from active responsibilities. In 1973, His Holiness announced his resignation from patriarchal responsibilities, and he married. Today, aside from his sister, brother, and sister-in-law, nieces and nephews, wife, he is survived by 2 children. In 1973, His Holiness announced his resignation from the patriarchal responsibilities, and he married. Today, aside from his sisters, brother and sister-in-law, nieces and nephews, his wife, he is survived by 2 children. It might not have been known broadly at the time, but the Patriarch had agreed to return to the church to organize its affairs at the request of the bishops, including the Metropolitan Mar Yosip Kananishu in 1975. Tragically, his return was not realized. A clandestine plot was concocted to assassinate His Holiness Mar Eshai Shamoun, and was carried out on November 6, 1975. An assassin gunned him down at the door of his home in San Jose, California. He was 67 years old. Mar Eshai Shamoun, the 23rd Catholicos Patriarch of the East, was an innovative leader of the church and the Assyrian people, well schooled in both the ecclesiastical aspects of his vocation as well as erudite and urbane in the complexities of geopolitical issues that affected the Middle East, the Church of the East, and his Assyrian people. Always attuned to the needs of his flock and nation, he mindfully navigated the ever-changing geopolitical landscape with uncompromising ethics, integrity, and superior leadership, ever the hallmarks of his character. His ingrained spirituality and political sophistication set him apart as a true leader of distinction. Never has an Assyrian leader demonstrated such deftness and agility in managing both the secular and temporal affairs, which portray his true, magnificent stewardship of the Assyrian people in the Church of the East. And it says, proceeds of the sale of this book go to the Mar Shamoun Memorial Foundation, which was founded in early 1976. In the shocking aftermath after the assassination of Mar Eshai Shamoun, the 23rd Catholicos Patriarch, this foundation is devoted to the memory of Mar Eshai Shamoun, whose mission included educating non-Assyrians on the plight of the Assyrian nation and implementing church reforms so the Church of the East could flourish in the 20th century by publishing various books, other print media, and posthumous donations. The foundation is able to direct its proceeds to the needy members of the Assyrian Church of the East around the world and other philanthropic organizations. For more on His Holiness Mar Eshai Shamoun, the 23rd, the Patriarchal Family, the Mar Shamoun Memorial Foundation, please visit www.marshamoun.com. So I think we should acknowledge and appreciate his important and unique contributions. And since we had a hurricane and a tree fell through my library, I can't find my original copy, so I'm glad this book is in print. And so it's got the important book, the Pearl, the statement of faith, the doctrinal statement, what the Assyrian Church believes, the Church of the East believes, its doctrinal statement of faith is included in here, but also certain aspects and information about the lives of the translator of this important book into English, Mara Shamoun, Eshai Shamoun. And I got his book recently on the Assyrian tragedy, and we'll be discussing that as well on an upcoming episode of Voice of the Word.
Research, rescue, and restore. Help Voice of the Word and Aramaic Christian Ministries mission research the ancient languages, peoples, lands, cultures, and times of the Bible. Rescue persecuted Assyrian Christians in the Middle East and restore Christianity to its original Semitic roots. For Stephen Missick's books, online giving, and other resources from Aramaic Christian Ministries, visit www.stephenmissick.com. Join us next time on Voice of the Word as we research the Scriptures, rescue persecuted Christians, and restore the Church to its Semitic roots.